Section 6.3, Factoring Special Products. So we're going to learn all the different ways thrown together with our factoring. First thing you always want to look for is the greatest common factor. Then you're going to know if you have two terms, it's going to follow one of these. If you have three terms, you'll fall in this category. And if you have four terms, last category. So if you have two terms, you should remember a squared minus b squared was the difference of squares. And so that factored into a plus b and a minus b. These next two are the new things that we're learning in 6.3. Everything else should be review, but you need to memorize these formulas. There's no way to get to these answers without memorizing. So a difference of cubes says if you have the first thing being cubed and the second term being cubed, follow the formula of a minus b, and then a trinomial, a squared plus ab plus b squared. We'll do some examples. In the sum of cubes, a cubed plus b cubed, you'll start off with a plus b, and then a squared minus ab plus b squared. So I always remind students to think of SOAP, and SOAP will help you with your signs. We're going to start off with the same sign, then the opposite sign, and the last term is always positive. So we'll start off with the same sign, then we'll do the opposite sign, and the last term is always positive. With the sum of cubes, we start off with the same sign, then the opposite sign, and then always positive. So if you have three terms, you could do the C method if the number in front of x squared is 1. You could do AC method. That's when A is not 1, and that's that lots of work that we just did. Perfect squares. You can memorize the perfect squares that if the first term is squared and the last term is squared and the middle term is twice AB, you could get to your answer a little bit quicker. You could also do the AC method or the C method on that one. And then if you have four terms, you factor by grouping. So after you look for greatest common factor, decide if you have two terms, three terms, or four terms and follow accordingly. So on number 1, we have x squared plus 10x plus 25. We look for a GCF and there's not one. So how many terms do we have? 1, 2, 3 terms. So if we have three terms, is it the C method, is it the AC method, or is it perfect squares? Well, it's either C or perfect squares. It is the C method, but it's also perfect squares because the last number is 25 and 5 squared is 20 and 5 squared is 25. So you could factor this into just x plus 5 times x plus 5, and that becomes x plus 5 quantity squared. You could do the perfect squares or you could do the C method. That works for either one. So on number 2, we look for GCF and there is none. And now how many terms do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. And if we have 4 terms, we factor by grouping. How do we factor by grouping? We group the first two terms, take out what's in common, group the last two terms, take out what's in common. With the first two terms, there's an x squared, and I'm left with x plus 4, minus taking out a 9 and the negative, we're left with x plus 4. So be careful, just like we did in the previous sections, change your signs when you're factoring out that negative. What's in parentheses is the same, so we'll take out the x plus 4, and what we're left with is x squared minus 9. But we're not done, don't circle that. X squared minus 9 is actually a difference of squares. That's going to factor into x plus 3 and x minus 3. So we end up with x plus 4 still, and this factors into x plus 3, x minus 3. So you can have a lot more different types of factoring going on in section 6.3. So on number 3, we have no GCF, so we look to see how many terms we have, and we have two terms. So if we have two terms, it's either difference of squares or difference of cubes since it's a minus sign, and it's just a difference of squares. So your difference of squares says this comes from 9x and this comes from 7y. So we end up with 9x plus 7y and 9x minus 7y. Difference of squares, different signs. So this one is a new one, so we'll go over it in depth. A cubed minus 64. There's only two terms and it is a difference of cubes. So the cubes formula says it's going to start off with a minus b, then a squared plus ab plus b squared. So what is my a? Well, it's a because a times a times a is 64. What is going to be being cubed that gives me a 64 is 4 because 4 times 4 times 4. So a is my a and 4 is my b. So plugging that into the formula, I get a minus 4. Then I need to take a and square it, so I just get a squared. My sign is a plus, and I multiply a times b. So a times 4 is 4a. And then I take my b, which is 4, and 4 squared is 16. You will never be able to go farther with your cubes formulas, so stop there. So on the next page, number 5, we always look for GCF first, and there is no GCF. So then we look to see how many terms we have, and we have 3 terms. And since we have 3 terms and the number in front of x squared is not 1, we know that we're going to have to do the AC method. So we're going to start off by multiplying a times c. So hopefully you remember what we did in the previous section. So when we multiply 6 times negative 15, we end up with a negative 90. Then we want factors of negative 90 that add up to a negative 1, which would be a 10 and a negative 9, with the 10 being negative and the 9 being positive. So then we replace the b term, so we end up with 6x squared minus 10x plus 9x minus 15. Hopefully you practiced this already. We have 4 terms now, so we factor by grouping the first 2 and grouping the second 2. What's in common with the first 2 is a 2 and an x, and left with 3x minus 5, plus sign in between. What's in common with the next 2 is a 3, and I'm left with 3x minus 5. If these are not the same, you've done something wrong. These are the same, so we'll take out the 3x minus 5, and we're left with 2x plus 3. So on number 6, first thing to look for is a GCF, and there is something in common in all 3 of them. There's a 2x squared in common. So if I take out a 2x squared from the first term, I'm left with 6x squared. From the second term, I'm left with a 31x, and the last term, I'm left with a 35. So now you need to do the AC method to continue. So I'm going to let you finish this one. I'm going to give you the answer, but make sure you show the work on how you would get to 2x squared, and then 3x minus 5, and 2x minus 7. Just keep bringing that GCF down in front and do the AC method in the middle. So on number 7, we have 2 terms. First thing we look for is a GCF, and we see that there's a y to the 5th in common, and we're going to be left with 25y squared minus 16. Now that there's 2 terms, we look for a difference of squares. This is a 5y and this is a 4, so we know it could be a difference of squares. So we're going to leave the y to the 5th on the outside, do the difference of squares formula, which is 5y plus 4 and 5y minus 4. Difference of squares, different signs. So on number 8, we're going to look for a GCF first, and the GCF is a 10, and we're left with x cubed minus 125y cubed. So here we have a sum of cubes. What is being cubed that gives me an x cubed is x. What's being cubed to give me a 125y cubed is a 5y, because 5 times 5 times 5 is a 125, and y times y times y is y cubed. So let's write the formula. A cubed plus b cubed, you do have to have this memorized, is a plus b, then a squared minus ab plus b squared. So we're just going to follow the formula, plugging in the a and the b, and the 10 is still going to come down in front. So we have our binomial and then our trinomial. So x is a and b is 5y. So now we're going to take the x and square it, so we get x squared minus a times b. So x times 5y is 5xy. Plus, then we're going to take the b and square it. So 5y times 5y is 25y squared. Again, with the cubes formula, you'll never be able to go farther. Number 9, we have 3 terms. There is no GCF, so all you need to do is the AC method. I'm going to let you try that one all on your own, and the answer is going to be 5a minus 4 and a plus 6. Make sure you show the work. Now look at number 10. 49w squared minus 42w plus 9. Well, it looks like the AC method, but you're going to have to multiply 49 times 9. That's going to be kind of a large number. So you might want to look and go, well, is there an easier way? And the easier way is to see that this is a perfect square. This comes from 7w, this comes from 3. And why do I have a minus in between? Because I need to multiply and get a positive, but add to get that negative. So that would give me a 21w negative, and another negative 21w, which would give me a negative 42. So if for some reason the numbers are a little bit larger, you might want to see if there's a perfect square. If it is a perfect square, use the square formula. If you don't see it, you can always do the AC method. Your numbers will just be a little bit larger. Alright, so lastly, let's do number 11, and then number 12 you can do on your own. 11, we look for GCF first, and there's not. So we look at it and see that it's cubes. What's being cubed to give me a 27y cubed is a 3y. What's being cubed here would be a 2x. So that's my A and that's my B. I prefer you write the formula every time, a cubed minus b cubed, because the more you write it, the more you'll remember it. And the only way to get to this answer is to have the formula memorized. So my A is 3y, so we're going to come down here, and my B is 2x. Now I have to take my A and square it, so 3y times 3y is 9y squared. Plus, and then multiply 3y times 2x, so 3y times 2x is 6xy. And then I have to take my 2x and square it, so 2x times 2x is 4x squared. And again, you'll never be able to go farther with your cubes formula. So number 12, I'll just give you the answer. I want you to write the formula and try it out. You should have ended up with 4y plus 5x, and then you're going to have a 16y squared minus a 20xy plus a 25x squared.